We begin tonight with the fallout from the deadly police beating of Tyre Nichols. He was 29 years old and had a 4-year-old son. Tyre was laid to rest today. Vice President Kamala Harris was in attendance. Nichols was hospitalized after his arrest on January 7th, and he died 3 days later. On Monday, 3 employees with the Memphis Fire Department were also fired. Officials say 2 more Memphis police officers were put on leave. One of them we told you about yesterday. His name is Officer Preston Hemphill. The 7th officer has not been publicly identified as of yet, and those 2 officers have not been fired. They have simply been suspended pending investigation. Only 5 officers, these 5 officers were fired. They were indicted on second-degree murder charges in Nichols' death last week. The others, we'll find out what happens to them. Nichols' brother spoke out Tuesday saying that Tyre was an all-around great person. He called him selfless, and he referred to him as, quote, the light of the room. He also says he wishes he could have been there for his brother on the night he was killed.
I'm 99% sure my brother's never gotten into a fight before, and the one time he get into an altercation with other humans, we wasn't there to protect him. As growing up as kids, having older brother or older sister and you get into an altercation, your older brother, your older sister will be there to help you. And on this night, January 7th, my brother was left alone. Because if I was there, they would have to kill me too.
Now there are calls for the Memphis Chief of Police, Sarah Lynn Davis. She is the department's first black female police chief, and we wish that meant that she would do something to change how people of color are policed, or maybe change the system of policing itself. But none of that seems to be the case. Davis set up the Scorpion Task Force that these cops were on who beat Tyre. She was also in charge of the Red Dog unit in Atlanta, Georgia, another similar type of rogue unit. Now, that unit had numerous allegations of excessive force and police brutality levied against it, and the unit was dissolved in 2011 after Davis was no longer with the department. In 2008, Davis was fired from the Atlanta Police Department after 2 detectives accused her of telling them not to investigate a sergeant's husband for child pornography. He was indicted by a federal grand jury and pleaded guilty. Listen, you see smoke? There's probably fire. And Davis appears to be an example of what happens when cops are allowed to just go through department after department across the country after being culpable in misconduct. The cycle, it never ends. And when the cycle never ends, people end up dead. Joining me to discuss this is Johanna Fernandez. She is the author of The Young Lords, A Racial History. She also teaches 20th century U.S. history and the history of social movements at the City University of New York. Also with us tonight is Corey Pegues. He is a retired NYPD executive. He's also the author of the book Once a Cop. I want to thank you both for joining me. Corey, I'm going to start with you. You are a former New York police officer. You have been on the ground. You have been in the heat of things when events like this happen. When you watch those 5 officers engaged in a brutal beating of Tyre Nichols, what ran through your mind?
Thanks for having me, first of all. What ran through my mind was Ku Klux Klan lynching. When you look at the pieces or the factors of a lynching, they would chase the prey down, kidnap them, and brutally assault them until death. And all of these factors fit in with this homicide or murder of Tyre Nichols. It was very sad. Just to let you know, I wasn't surprised. I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for years that Black America is mad at the white cops, but I know 1,000 white cops, black cops, I don't want to come to my house at all. This case here shows that it's not about the race of the cop, it's the culture. For 5 black cops to brutally assault this person with body cameras on, and you listen to their verbiage, if you're watching all these videos, stop resisting, put your hands behind your back. All of the guys that get killed, they're doing that. They're not resisting. They do have their hands behind their back, but the arrogance in thinking that they can get away with no impunity, it's very sad that this murder occurred.
Wow. I want to come back to that point about what they were saying on the tape, because that's important. Johanna, let me bring you into the conversation. Corey said something really interesting here. He said the problem here isn't the race of the cops. when we see something like this happen, there are lots of people who very quickly will say, see, this isn't about racism. The cops were black this time. How do you respond to people who try to sort of dismiss the value or the significance of race in cases like this simply because the police officer and even the police chief is not white?
Well, this is not about the race of the cops, as your guest said. This is about the police. In this case, not police culture, but the institution of policing itself. And I think this is important because we have this conversation over and over and over again. Americans are now facing PTSD. Black people in particular are suffering a public health crisis of epic proportion every time we see Black people and brown people dismembered by the cops. But how does the police emerge? The police emerges in the United States as an institution charged with returning escaped enslaved people back to the plantation. It was an institution, the slave patrol, from which the police emerges, that was compulsory. All white people of different classes in the United States, beginning in the 17th and 18th century, were compelled by law to be part of these militias, and their job was to apprehend and beat enslaved people fleeing the institution of slavery. So the institution is entirely connected to white supremacy and racism in this country. But after the civil rights movement, we have an institution that's multi-ethnic and multiracial. But the essence of the police remains the same: to control Black bodies.
So Corey, help me get into the mind of a police officer who's operating in that tradition, right? We in the 90s, many of us who were doing activist work against police brutality, some of us thought that the solution was to integrate the police force, that if we just had black police chiefs, if we just had black police officers, if officers lived in the neighborhood, if all these things, then we would have a different response, because we didn't understand, to Johanna's point, that it was about the institution. We thought it was about the particular people in the institution. So now you got black cops, and now they're in our neighborhoods. They're patrolling our hoods. They're the ones stopping us. They're the ones trying to keep order and peace, as they call it. What makes them see somebody like Tyree Nichols as an enemy? What makes them be so violent against somebody like him, knowing that they also are black? How does this happen? How do we get there?
We get there easy. This is how you get there. In Black and Brown's community, for over 100-something years, the police hunt. And in white communities, they protect and serve. That's not a lie. That's well documented. You can see the same crimes happen in the same community, but you'll see the officers act a lot different. And so as long as we have that mindset, and you put
Did
these
you know that as a
specialty
police
units
officer?
out.
Was that your? I get that you have an analysis now that you're off the force, but as a police officer, when you were on the force, is that how y'all were trained to think? Like, we're going to go in black neighborhoods and hunt?
Absolutely. So I was a cop. It's all in my book. So need an audience want to read the book. So when I was a cop in Astoria, Queens. So we all know Astoria. You have a black side, Queensbridge Projects, Astoria Projects. On the others, you have Woodside Project, and then over by Rikers Island, you have very affluent houses. Some of them, they're probably $800,000-$900,000 houses now, and when they had to get their numbers, the anti-crime unit, just like the Scorpion unit, they're mandated to get like 4 felonies a month. So you got 5 cops, 4 cops, 1 sergeant, and 4 felonies. So that's like at least 16 felonies. They can't come in with somebody urinating on a wall or anything. So they had to hunt. There was really no crime over by Rikers Island. So the way they would hunt, they would go over to Queensbridge, over to Astoria, Ravenswood Projects, Woodside Projects, and hunt. Even just do things like writing summonses over there, which I thought was like ludicrous for us to write summonses over there. And we wouldn't write summonses over in the white neighborhood. I would say, hey, well, why are we going over here? At least the people over there can afford to pay for the summonses. Over here in the projects, if we writing them for a tag, they're not going to be able to afford it. They're going to get a
Wow.
warrant.
So the actual
and then
policy
cycle
itself
continues.
is driving the way you police. Johanna, I only got about 30 seconds left, but what is the solution, right? If the solution isn't to integrate the police force, if the solution isn't just to have us get beat by black cops, what do we do?
Well, you have to start with what is the purpose of the police? The purpose of the police is to protect private property and to keep the people at the bottom of society in their place. In an institution that's directly connected to slavery, we've got to get rid of it. Our communities are safer without police.
So what I'm hearing is reforms are not enough. We need fundamental root-based change of police and policing and even how we understand safety in our communities. I like the way y'all talking. I like the way y'all are thinking. Professor Fernandez, Corey, thank you so much for joining me.